Did you get the file down there?
Yep, Evelyne, and then we can share it.
Yeah.
They change it. I can't believe they changed the computer.
Yeah.
Then the socket is not compatible to the projectors here. And there's no DVD room. So each school has a request by additional equipment to pay.
Ah, that's what you need to replace hang on with DVD. Yeah, I a different one. I have the DVD.
I didn't know that there's no DVD.
Because I said I need to use that for teaching.
So they're ordering the external one.
Right.
And I went to the teaching room the other day. Can't connect to the data projector because different socket.
Yeah.
Don't they know?
No, well, there's a lot.
When they order computer, don't they
There's a
know?
whole bunch of things to think about.
Yeah.
And there's only 2 USB sockets. We don't talk.
Technology.
Oh,
Yeah, I had
Do you
one
know when they
similar to-
recorded Eagles 360 and they send me email and say there's 2 recording, one morning, one afternoon, there's no morning in the system, would they be able to find it?
I assume so.
Okay.
Why would there be 2 recordings though? There's not been 2 events, right? Unless it's sending you an email saying, here's the audio is ready, and here's the video ready later. I'm not
Well,
too
it's
sure.
not in my account, it's only after the session, so I emailed them and say, the morning session is not there, they haven't got
Oh, I
back to
see.
me, it's
It
getting
could
really
be.
worried.
It could be that in timetable think you have a morning session.
No, they recorded the whole day. But
Record the
they
whole day.
broken into 2 sessions. So apparently they lost one in the system.
Yeah, I guess they're just sessions. The problem is this, if there's any technological errors, the students will complain.
Yes.
Once you just start them, semester, they can have
No.
first complaint, they will stop complaining for the rest of the semester. Your life now, which is not your fault.
Does anybody know if you can set your PowerPoint to be presentation but not full screen?
No.
No.
I
Never heard of
think it defaults to full screen.
Yeah.
Can't you?
I think then what we'll do is is that what's that one? Is that your presentation?
No, that is something else.
All right. I land on screen share.
Have you tried the course management system? I tried that.
No.
And it will increase our load.
Just
It will,
the
of course, and we're supposed to modify the subject information directly online. So
Yeah.
there's no admin
I can,
I'm not using any of them.
I can do
I just
this.
email them, this is what you need, and this is what you can find from the university network.
but that won't be
No, that's
live.
information.
It's not live, but at least I
Yeah.
record.
Yeah, but you rely on you to update it and check.
It
And
might be demanding it.
Well, actually, I don't mind it because when I
It's already been recorded in
go
terms
to
of
the
your
admin
audio.
process,
Yeah.
changes haven't got through.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
So at
necessary.
least now I'm responsible for it, so I know what's
Do
there.
that directly.
Good.
Yes.
And it's sort of like you've got to write it anyway, so you must just write it into the thing.
Yes.
So do you,
But I have difficulty
Yeah.
to copy and
I'll get online and
cut paste.
communicate to those
Uh,
things.
yeah, so- and I'll just go with.
Yes,
because I have to type.
Okay.
There might be sometimes the different key functions that you use. So you might have to use a different set of copy and paste functions. Because you know, like are you trying to? Well, I'm just wondering. Because sometimes if you use one, it doesn't work, but another one will work. Like in
No, talk business.
It's information.
like in LMS, you can't copy and paste. Like you can't paste in something that you can paste somewhere and not. So if you use the mouse to paste, you can do it. You can try to use a keyboard shortcut, it doesn't work. I'm just looking at mine. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's about the
Hey,
extent
Sally.
of my whole technical knowledge.
Okay, well, that's right. We were waiting for Sally, and she's here. So. Right. So maybe I should introduce myself. And I joined La Trobe University about a year ago. And I think, and I'm replacing Vivian Lim, who is, as you know, in Manila with WHO. And she said, why don't you just apply for the job? It will be easygoing. There's a few very simple subjects that you have to teach, and otherwise it's a sailing through academia job, which of course it didn't turn out to be so. But one of the things in the application process that the people who had to judge whether I was suitable for the job liked was that I had probably more than Vivian experience with online teaching. So from the very start of my appointment, Sophie Hill, the boss, the head of department, said, you've got to run a workshop to show what you've been doing in online teaching. If you're so good at it, you need to share it with the others. So it took about a year to get this far. And in that year, I have experienced a lot of the La Trobe systems and challenges. Maybe, and I've been frustrated, like you probably, with systems and procedures and technologies. And what I find interesting is that I come from Deakin University, and Deakin these days tries to advertise itself as the premium provider of online teaching. So they have a whole jargon and they have a whole division that does all of that, and they have about 100 leads. And what I hated about Deakin was the incredibly rigorous policies and standards and rules that you had to do this and you had to do that. Looking back on all of that, yes, that was frustrating, but on the other hand, it did mean that we were all on the same page. And we all knew what could be done and what should be done and how it should be done, and you knew who to call for help if it didn't work. Whereas at La Trobe, it is, and on the other hand, I do like that too, there's great diversity. And I think, like in genetics, diversity is good for survival. So in a way, diversity and anarchy is good. In another way, coming from Deakin, what I miss here is strong direction. This is how we do it. So I'm going to talk about e-learning and online education and blended mode. Not that I'm an expert, it's just that I've done it a lot. And it doesn't mean that what I've done in the past has any relevance to La Trobe, because things may run differently here. Maybe a little bit more about my own background. If people ask me who are you, what are you good at, I would say health science if I want to confuse them, and I would say health political science if I want to say what I really am. I try to apply political science to health. And so here at La Trobe, I'm teaching in first semester public health policy, and in second semester international health policy. And I'm also editor-in-chief of the journal Health Promotion International. So if you want to submit material to my journal, you are welcome to come and chat to me, and we see how that would materialize. So I thought I should start with my key messages rather than wait until the end and then say, well, this is what I feel. First of all, I know and I feel that when we talk about online or e-learning or blended learning, blended mode, there's a lot of confusion what it means. A lot of people think that it's just putting everything you have on the intertubes and that's it. And I think it is much more than that. But what exactly it is, I'm not really sure about. The other thing that I've learned is that online teaching or e-learning is not a panacea for bad teaching. If you're a bad teacher, probably online further deteriorates your teaching capacity. Because if you have a live audience and you see people are not responding to you, then you can tweak your message and you can try to connect with people. Whereas if you record a session and there's someone on the other end of the line that you can't see or hear or feel, it's harder to tweak your delivery. So unless you're a really good teacher and unless you really take on board feedback for everything that you do, you probably damage yourself by going online just like that. My impression here at La Trobe is that people think that we need to go online because it's cheaper. And I think initially, and that's also my experience from other universities where I worked, is that certainly initially it's not cheaper to go online. You need to invest in technology, you need to invest in support, you need to really invest in getting things going. And I think La Trobe is really at the very early stages of doing that, and only by investing properly into this, you would get it going the right way. And the messages we get, I think, here are that if we go online, we would get thousands of students who all pay fees for beautiful blended MOOCs and all that sort of stuff. MOOC is a massive open online course where hundreds of thousands of people, and I will come to talk about that a little bit later on, pay nothing for stuff that is out on the internet, and then they start paying if they want to get credentials, if they want to do a test, or if they want to get deeper material, they start paying for it, and that's the income generation strategy of a MOOC. But I think blended learning, online e-learning is initially certainly not cheaper. And in the long run, to do the maintenance of it well, I think even then it might not be income generating to offset what you invest in it. So, but that's my idea. Also, I think online teaching, people believe that you can just do a movie and put it on the internet and say, well, enjoy the movie and you will learn deeply, profoundly. And I'm pretty sure that it doesn't work like that. I think online delivery, e-learning still needs to be bespoke and it needs to be responsive. So you need to put in systems that respond to student need. You can't just put a video out there and say, enjoy, learn, read a book and that's it. And I will talk about that. And therefore, I think MOOCs, those massive open online courses, are interesting, but they only become really interesting in tertiary education if they become responsive and bespoke to what students need, ultimately. And I think that's something that may be forgotten here at La Trobe in the efforts to go online, that still you need to put in people who respond to student needs. And you need to be tech savvy. You need to have at least a modicum of interest in the technology, to make it come alive for people. Just a series of PowerPoints online with lots of words on lots of slides, that's not what engages students, and that's not where you can make a difference. So the classical or the class model that we want to leave behind in modern teaching. This is how we used to do things, and one of the amazing things here at La Trobe is that on several occasions now I've been asked to deliver 3-hour lectures, and that is stunning. That is, I think, the attention span of this generation students is no longer 45 minutes as it was in the past. You know, when I went to university, I could, with a little bit of effort, pay attention for 45 minutes and process the information. I think these days with Twitter and social media and text messaging and all that stuff, the attention span might be 10 minutes, at best maybe 15 minutes. So 3 hours frontal education, where the assumption is that there's some expert in front of a classroom and that these people very attentively absorb that knowledge and do something with it, that's not how it's supposed to work. I think the modern ideal is that we discuss things, we engage, and whether that is really face-to-face or in a social media context where people tweet each other or go on Facebook, doesn't really matter, I think, but it is about engagement. It is about processing material and making it come alive, and having the ability to apply it to your own situation, to your own background. We have many international students these days. In the class that I'm about to teach, there's 60 students and 40 of them are overseas students. And they have different learning modes, they have different expectations. And you need to adapt to what they expect. You can't just say, okay, here's a book, read it, and we'll test you on it. No, you need to discuss with those students how it all would work. Now, one of the things I think we need to be fully aware of is that we connect with students, but also with our colleagues, with the world in different ways. So it's no longer classroom teaching where we stand in front of a bunch of people and do this. Connections have become more complex. It's not just me and you as a sort of a fuzzy group of people. All of these people here are talking to each other. You also learn through reflection from each other's experience, and that's one of the things that I like in engaging with international students. They teach me about Nepal and Bangladesh, and they teach each other about Nepal and Bangladesh and Australia. So this was the old model, where these ladies connect one person on the one end of the telephone line to another person on the other end of the telephone line, and maybe our role was in the past to be one of those ladies, to connect knowledge with curious students. But these days it's like this. You know, it's a mess, and you can't control that mess. Stuff flows all over the place, and students want to know what is the key reading for a subject, but they also go out on the internet, in Wikipedia, to find other stuff, and they often want to learn quick and easy rather than long and tediously. So we need to recognize that. So my first example of something that I did at Deakin, in a way, takes on board all of these different connections. I was asked when I was at Deakin to move. I originally was in public health, and then I moved into the medical school. And my challenge was to set up the best program in public health teaching in any medical school around the world. And that's what I did, I think. So I looked at medical education, the pedagogy of training medical students. And I looked at what was missing in terms of public health content, and I realized that virtually everything was missing in public health content. So I negotiated very hard and made public health compulsory in the medical education, which is unique in Australia to make it compulsory. It's not something that is there on the sidelines. It is integrated at the core of medical education. It is all the time. It's not 6 weeks in year 4. It starts at day 1 of the first year, and it continues into the internships. So when students are in the hospital, bedside teaching, in the very classical model of the master-apprentice relation, where the surgeon tells the slave, this is how you do it. Even there, I wanted to teach, and I could teach through modern technology, public health. So I taught public health across all the years of a medical program. The reason that I had to leave at one point was that, of course, public health is at the margins of medicine. So there was no money to support more than just me in teaching that. So it was just me teaching all public health to all medical students across all those years. So my workload, I was doing 2.5 full-time equivalents, just teaching. So that was a bit challenging, and it was destroying me intellectually, but also my health. So that's why I left last year and joined La Trobe, where I'm enjoying teaching much more than unwilling, critical, sarcastic medical students. Here, at least, I have students who appreciate what I do. So what I developed was to develop, and you see the little logo here. I developed with the division of student learning a model called real-time, reflective, asynchronous learning technologies, not technologies, but technologies in medical education. And the idea was that we would stream content into students' devices, whether it was a phone, a smartphone, or a tablet, or a laptop, that they could access anywhere, and that they had to engage with it. It wasn't just a video; it was something that needed the engagement of the student to make it work, and they needed to use that technology to reflect on a patient experience. So they were in the hospital, walking around on the wards, and they would have to find a patient that had characteristics that was covered in some of the material. So these things here, I'm not sure whether you can actually see all of this, but I identified from the literature what the gaps in public health knowledge in medical education normally are, and then supplemented them with what the mission of the School of Medicine at Deakin was. For instance, here, farmer health. Now, that is not worldwide a gap in medical learning, but Deakin has a farmer health center, and Deakin is to serve rural Victoria, where there are lots of farmers, and farmers have particular health issues. So there's farmer health, there's men's health here, continuity of care from a management perspective, Aboriginal health, screening, children's health here, diabetes management and narrative medicine for medical students, successful aging. So these are all the front pages, and I will show you one, of a learning package that delivers content to students, and they need to engage with it. It has literature associated within the package. It has literature, PDFs, websites, and they need to do stuff to access that before the material progresses. So you watch a little clip, and it stops. The only way to go further into your learning experience is to download something. Of course, there's no guarantee that once you download it that they actually read it, but then in the assessment there's a requirement to show that you have actually read it. So 10 of these packages they had to do, and each of those packages, because medical students, maybe like public health students, maybe like any student, they're a little bit lazy. So the end of each package was concluded with a prompts list. So these are the lists of issues that were addressed in those packages, and they were the prompts based on which the students could select a patient that they would see in the hospital, or for instance here, violence. I talked to two activists, feminists, two women who were very enthusiastic in dealing with domestic violence. And I thought that was a key public health issue. And students should be able to identify domestic violence and do something about it, and know that they will not be experts in the prevention of domestic violence and in follow-up of domestic violence, but they should know in a public health way how to refer patients to others, how to bring in help in dealing with patients who suffered from domestic violence. So these were the key points here, that their perspective in that package was about feminism and social justice, that domestic violence is very much hidden, but it's also everywhere in our society. It's complex, multi-layered, etc., etc. So based on these things, they would be able to identify a patient who was struggling with these things, who suffered as a result of domestic violence and would have to deal with these things. And then based on those prompts and based on the material that's streamed into their devices, they would have to reflect on that material. Because just giving them a test on stuff like this isn't necessarily what makes them learn. So domestic violence, you can look at the incidence and the morbidity and maybe some mortality in domestic violence. You can actually read up on global patterns and causes and all the scholarly stuff around domestic violence. But ultimately, what we want to accomplish, particularly medical education, but I also think in any other type of education, is that people process that and use that material to become better professionals. And you only do that through a process of reflection, to say, what did I see, what does it mean for me? So we produced, I realize now that I say we, to make it sound grandiose than it was, I produced a guide for reflective practice and reflective learning. So if we want you to reflect on these things and make it your own, how do you do that? Because a lot of the more clinically interested students would say that just using the verb to reflect means that they reflect. To reflect is a process where you follow a number of steps. You ask yourself, what just happened? What was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was good and bad about it? What sense can I make of the situation? And sense making connects to the evidence. That's where the scholarship comes in, but it also connects to how you are a part of the world. Asking what else could I have done, and then finally, if it happened again in my professional practice, would I act differently? And that is where deep learning actually comes from. So students received training on reflection and reflective practice and how to make all of this experience their own. And before I show you how they actually did that, I want to show you one of those packages. So this is the package on Aboriginal health. And I'm talking here to the Aboriginal Hospital Liaison Officer at Barwon Health. And the Aboriginal Hospital Liaison Officer is an Aboriginal person. There's a program in Victoria that appoints Aboriginal people in hospitals to liaise between the community and clinical practitioners, and has a kind of translating function and a facilitating function. So this woman is called Auntie Lynn, Lynn McGuinness, and so this is what it looks like, and it has all these little clips. Auntie Lynn, my first question may come out of ignorance. We are not related. Why would I call you Auntie?
I'm an elder in my community, and I've been an elder since I was the age of 40, and that's out of respect for the work I do and the way I mentor my young people in the community. And most people call me auntie, or they call me miss. And
so I'm not
really
going to let you
avoid
listen to
calling me
this. The good thing about this is that I can be allowed to ask stupid questions. When students engage with Aboriginal people, often they feel a little bit guilty, they feel a little bit challenged. So they would not dare to ask the questions that I am asking. Like, this is Auntie Lynn. Why would I call her Auntie? And especially if you're not Australian. For Australians, you might assume to some extent that they know that elders in Aboriginal communities are aunties and uncles, and that Aboriginal communities are complex affairs. But here I could actually there's a lag.
Someone would tell them they would actually go up and say to them, you know, you need to call her aunt.
Don't worry about it, Evelyn. I'll sort out the slides.
Yeah. The thing is, you can't fast forward. There's a slider here, and you can fast forward it to the end. But if you fast forward it, the key points won't appear here. So this is how we engage the students. And then in some cases, at the end of each clip, there's a PDF that you have to click that pops up, and then only then you can progress this. Now, 10 of those packages, each clip is 3 to 4 minutes. So that's about the attention span of a student, and you can stop it and go back to it at a later time. In total, none of these packages is longer than 40 minutes. So that is, you know, what you would normally do. I don't need to be in the screen. Keep going. So how do students reflect, and how do we test this? Again, this has to be online, because they are all over the state. They're not in a hospital right next door. They can't come back to a classroom and tell me what they experienced. So they had to do this in an online mode, and they produced wikis. And the reason we use Wiki as a platform, and students were complaining about using the Wiki as a mode to do this. Students just wanted to write an essay, because that was what they are used to, right? You write an essay and that's it. Reflection is and learning overall is a dynamic enterprise, and a Wiki allows you to keep going. It's an evolving thing. You can go back to your wiki and have second thoughts about things. And reflection is not something that you do on a Sunday morning and say, okay, let's reflect and let's write it up. It's a process that takes many months. And the wiki technology allows for change all the time. And the good thing about that is that I could go into the background and I could see, because it keeps a history of entries, I could see how students actually reflected over time. I could see whether they just did all of it on a Sunday morning. Well, that's not how it works. Or whether they did it in 10, 20, sometimes 100 installments where they did all of this. And here are two examples of wikis where students actually reflect on this and say, look, I never realized that Aboriginal health was such a big issue in Australia, or I never realized that there were these challenges, and I really wanted to know more about it. I went to visit the Wateron Co-op, our local Aboriginal health service, and I talked to these people, and what I learned was this and this and this and this. Ideally, in a pedagogical way, what you would want to happen is a degree of peer assessment, that students look at each other's material, because that is where reflection really makes a difference. The problem here is that you need to respect the privacy of patients that are being discussed, so you can't really share that with everybody. So it was just me in a safe environment looking at these things and applying what's called a marking rubric. So I had a very extended rubric system where I would be able to look at different points in those reflections and say, okay, this is how you did well, this is how you didn't do well. And then on the wiki, in the discussion tab, because a wiki has, you may know that, a discussion tab, I wrote my feedback. So it was all instant. It was not synchronous. It wasn't that they were talking to me and that I was giving them the feedback immediately. It was asynchronous. They did something, I looked at it and gave them feedback, and then based on the feedback they could refine their reflections, because this is a long-term process. It's not an assessment that says, bang, now you have failed, or bang, now you have passed. Those clinical placements are happening over a period of 1.5 years, and all of this could evolve over a period of 1.5 years. And you can imagine that with 150 students a year, each writing 10 of these pieces, it was quite an overwhelming workload in managing this. But students ultimately really liked it. They thought this was a worthwhile experience in public health. Comparing it to other medical schools in the state, we think that that this did make a difference in preparing students for a more activist role in the health system. Of course, I have left, and the question is whether this is still alive out there. I don't know. Now, all of this could be part of a MOOC. We could just put this online and say, medical students around the world, please look at this and do whatever you want with it. And then they would miss out on that reflective feedback, on that progress, that evolution in insight that they would be able to get. And MOOCs are the big thing. At least we are led to believe that they are the big thing. And recently in The Economist, there was an article on the digital degree and how all of this is going to change the face of tertiary education, and how fantastic all of this is. And here's a few statistics, and you will see that in just one provider, edX, they have hundreds of thousands of people enrolled in those MOOCs, and you would see that it's not just attending to the needs of people in higher education. A lot of people just access this stuff and enjoy what is going on. If you look at the space in which this happens, these are some of the providers, and then I'm not even talking about iTunes, that also has a university function. But here are some of the providers of these big MOOCs where hundreds and thousands of people can enroll in one course: edX, Udacity, Coursera. And we do business at La Trobe with an enterprise called Academic Partnerships, and I try to find how well they're doing compared to all of those other providers, but none of this is evaluated. None of this says, does it work? Do they deliver? Is it effective? Is it efficient? Is it cost effective, cost efficient? What is the quality of the education? And pure enrollments doesn't mean the number of enrollments says nothing about the quality, of course. Here in Australia, I guess the biggest newspaper is not necessarily the best newspaper, and the same is true for these MOOCs. The biggest MOOCs are not necessarily the best MOOCs. So I think we need to be critical and certainly hesitant in going into this environment with our eyes wide shut, to paraphrase a movie title. So we need to be critical about how to do this. I also think that we don't need those folk. We can do it ourselves. If you're a little bit tech savvy, you can do it yourself. And I'm sure that Lee would agree with me. Yeah, there's no reason why these enterprises would siphon off a good income that we can generate ourselves, or not just good income, intellectual satisfaction. And in doing all of this stuff, I love it, and I love to be out there and get feedback through all different kinds of fora from students who say, why don't you do this, why don't you that, tweak this, do that. So how would you do it yourself? Well, I think first of all you have to think well, and part of what I'm talking about here is to encourage us to think about this well. And I'm not saying that there's any preferred way. It's just engaging with stuff and thinking about, okay, what could I do and how could I do it? So for me, in delivering this, 90% of the preparation is just sitting on the couch and thinking, if I would do this, if I would do that, and then maybe on the iPad Google a little bit, and then ultimately when I have all the ideas, I make a presentation. Like, this is a PowerPoint, but you could also use other software like Prezi, or I am a little bit old school. The logo here, this one here, who would know what that is? That is Corel Presentations. So some of you are about my generation, I think, yes. When we started to use computers, there was something called WordPerfect. Anyone remember WordPerfect? And the good thing about WordPerfect was that it was perfect. It was a fantastic word processor. It was much better than Word. But Microsoft and bloody Bill Gates took over the world. Although some people, like Asterix and Obelix, some people resist and they still use what is now called Corel Presentations, like me. But the problem is, with the world being dominated by Microsoft products, that it's a bit harder to share. But with a little bit of effort, you can still do that. Prezi is the newer thing. You may have seen things that move all over the screen and zoom in and zoom out, and they move. Sometimes a little bit overwhelming in its tech savviness. And that I think is one of the challenges. That yes, you want to go into animations and interesting presentations, but don't go overboard, because I remember one of my first presentations ever was for an audience of 100 people from Laos, the Lao People's Republic. And I thought I need to blow them away with how clever my presentation is. And I did blow them away, but not with the content of my presentation. I blew them away with all the colors and the things that moved, and they were hanging in their seats like this. What just happened to us? So try to keep it simple. Impress, but try to keep it simple. So you had an idea, then you do a presentation in whatever platform you like, then you edit it, you go back. You make a recording like we're doing right now on Hangouts. I use something called Camtasia, and I then produce the stuff. And if you produce it in a platform called Flash, you can actually put in what's called hot zones, and you can make a movie that is clickable. So like in those reflective things, you can click on an area of the screen and stuff would come up. Videos on YouTube or on Vimeo, I use Vimeo myself, usually are not in that format and they're not clickable, but you can do that. So you film, you record your presentation, then you edit it, you slice in stuff that you think is important, you can stop it, you can reflect on what you just said, you can repeat things, you can zoom in on certain parts of your presentation, you can zoom out, you can slice in other movie material, etc. And then you put it on some kind of platform. And the platform that we use here at La Trobe is Moodle, but you could do it on Wikiversity, or you could make a blog or a website, whatever. So you put it out there, and it's not that you can then forget. It's out there and we move on to something else. You need to do stuff with the material that you posted. You need to connect. You need to connect with the students. And how do you do that? Well, there are all sorts of platforms that allow for direct engagement with students. When I talk to my colleagues at the city campus, they say, all this online stuff doesn't work because I don't see the students. I don't know what moves them. You can do stuff online. I don't know what happens. You do know what happens, you just don't use the right platform. And here are just 3 platforms that you can use, and they link in to each other. They link into learning management systems. They can also link into to wikis. You can WebEx. I got a tweet from a colleague in Canada recently who said, I hate what I call verbing. So turning words that are not verbs into verbs. You can WebEx. I WebEx, you WebEx, we WebEx. But you can WebEx, which is a technology that brings people online. You can actually see them if you have a reasonable connection. They can raise their hands, they can engage with you, they can put things on a screen to share with you. And Hangouts, Google Plus, and Illuminate Live do exactly the same thing. Yep.
What concerns me about is, I mean, I accept all of that, but it's the interconnections between them that doesn't seem to be happening. It's all sort of like a spoken wheel, that you're at the centre and you're interacting with them. How do you get them to interact with each other? Which is ideal.
Well, look, and the environment, that's a very good and legitimate question, and I think that is a main concern. So one of the units that I taught at Deakin was on healthy cities. And these students were around the world. One year they were from the B's, Berlin, Buenos Aires, Brisbane. It was fantastic. It so happened that these students were in cities all starting with B's. I had experienced this spoken wheel, me in the center and then everybody at me, look at me. What you can do, so these platforms, and in particular Illuminate Live, can be active for an entire semester. So it's always there, and you can always go online and meet in a private room. You can set up private rooms where students meet. Now they need to have a reason to meet. You're not going online because you think, I'm a bit bored, let's have a glass of wine and let's meet in one of those virtual spaces online. So you need to create an environment where it is necessary to go online. And in this Healthy Cities unit that I taught, students, the assessment was that they had to produce 2 wikis. One wiki on their own city, for exactly the same reasons that we used the wiki for the same reason that I shared with you before. But they also had to do a joint wiki where they were writing the encyclopedia of healthy cities. And I gave a number of titles, of chapters in the encyclopedia, but then they would have to come together and figure out who was going to do what. And they could do it. I facilitated this. I would say these are some times when groups could meet. But it's up to you to meet. Go ahead. Organize this yourselves. And they did, because if they would not, they wouldn't pass the test. So they had to come together, engage with each other in that private room. And in order to run that, I had to do a sort of a very small introductory course to show them the potential of these platforms. Because unlike Facebook or any of those other platforms where you just post stuff and the rest of the world sees it, this needs active engagement. You need to know what the system can do. And what this system can do, what Illuminate Live, which was the platform that we used, did. You could post something on a whiteboard and all the others in your group can grab it off the whiteboard and save it on their computer. So if you found an article that was interesting, you could post it there, you could read the first page together, and then you would say, okay, let's go back to where we are. We all grab that article off Illuminate Live, we'll read it, and we'll meet again in 3 days to discuss the article. Or you could take a web tour. You could say, I have found this fantastic website, I'll show you, and you go there. And then you could write together on the wiki, which is the other platform. But I agree with you, to get there requires...
It seems that we are getting contradictory messages. One is to go online, and one is to get the students to engage together. But we're not actually... How to get them engaged together online is like, that's the challenge. How to do that.
Exactly. And there's a bit of technophobia. So some students feel, and we believe, the powers that be somewhere believe that we're all connected and we're all on our smartphones. But that doesn't mean that students know that this exists and how it can be used. So I would say that any student arriving here in their study skills program should get to know how to use this.
Yeah, that's be one resource that I think that should be shared. Those modules that you give to students and to staff about how to use those particular platforms, how they actually use, rather than us all going and inventing our own, because we can modify them for them.
Exactly.
There needs to be a common resource about how to use Illuminate Live, what it means and what it can do, so that we don't...
Absolutely, and I agree, And so what I did, the very first thing that I did, first of all, you have to schedule it. This is not a voluntary thing, you just come and see. No, like a normal class, you need to schedule it. It needs to be timetabled. And you can do it in the middle of the night, but you still need to timetable it, and students need to show up in cyberspace, but they need to show up. And the very first thing that I did was play a game. I would play a game with them where they had to draw things, Pictionary. You know the game Pictionary? Well, Pictionary is one of those games that works really well on a platform like this. You can draw and people can shout, and they can scratch on the screen as well. And by doing that, you make students realize that this is as real as sitting around the table as we do, which I think is truly amazing.
One of the assumptions,
No.
One of the assumptions that are in that, apart from the students' tech savviness, which are not always there, is that they have actually access to those resources in their homes, and some of them obviously don't.
Yeah,
that's an equity issue.
I realized that because we just got the feedback on our teaching, at least I did yesterday, and I developed my policy unit in blended mode, so all of it was online. But I flipped the classroom, so everything was online. All the teaching, all the lectures was there, and I was not going to repeat the lectures in the classroom. The classroom was there for me to engage with students and the students with each other. So they had all the substance, they had done the reading, they had enjoyed, I hope, the lectures, but then they would show up and we would engage. What I discovered, and some of them didn't tell me this in class, but in the evaluation that I got yesterday, is that in their homes, some of them don't even have internet. Some have very slow internet. I think that's a bad excuse.
Yeah.
You go on campus and you have internet here and fast internet.
Yes, but I have a friend who's studying at the UK universities, and he was required to submit an assignment while he was in China, but because he didn't have access to Google, he couldn't get anything done in relation to Google, including the Gmail. But when he returned back to the university didn't accept his explanation, and they just believe this student just making some excuse and eventually the student dropped out.
Yeah. No, and that is a real. I had two students who were in China. They actually were based here, but for personal reasons they had to go to China, and they thought, they're connected. There's internet there, but the what's it called? The Chinese e-wall.
Yes, the firewall.
Yeah. So it makes it impossible.
They can't get access to YouTube, they can't get access to Facebook, no Google, lots of things.
So I will show you that I tweet some of my teaching. So you would think, how is that possible in 140 characters? But I tweet some of my teaching or updates on my teaching. And these two students said, impossible. Twitter does not live in China. So it is a really big issue, and there is an equity issue.
And the other issue, of course, is that they didn't tell you. I mean, that's what even when you ask, have they done it, they'll just be silent, and you actually have to, I think, individually ask every student, have you done this, like face to face, to actually find out whether those problems exist.
Yeah. Well, look, in my experience, this is a challenge. On the other hand, I have had such rewarding experiences in cyberspace. It's just a very small story. When I was teaching this Healthy Cities unit to students in cities starting with a B, this was another season, but there was a guy called John, and John said, I have problems getting onto the internet. I can't download all the movies that you did. I can't watch them online, and at the same time work on the wiki that I have to do. I simply don't have the internet time. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. You don't have to. You find the internet time. Where are you? And he said, I'm in Lihir. Anyone ever heard of Lihir? Lihir is a small island 900 kilometers north of Port Moresby. And it is owned by the Lihir Gold Company, an Australian company, because it's one big nugget of gold. And the Lihir Gold Company is stripping that island. Just, it's an island. In a few years, probably there will be nothing left. So the Lihir Gold felt guilty, probably, and they gave all the villagers on that tiny island free internet. Yes, for 1 hour a day. So instead of just doing it all the time, they said, we give you free internet 1 hour a day. So, and fast. It was super fast internet, but just 1 hour. And with all the tasks that you have to do, 1 hour was not enough to do everything. So John said, well, this is my situation, and I don't know how to deal with this, because it's not exactly the Chinese e-wall, but I'm facing access issues. Lo and behold, one of my other students, a woman called Farzaneh Mahmoudzadeh. Any guess where she was from? The holy city of Qum in Iran. A girl, a woman, and an IT engineer, had a qualification in IT. So this was an Islamic woman IT engineer in Iran who had enrolled in my course. In itself, I thought, fantastic, I have accomplished something already. But Farzaneh said, John, don't worry, I will write a little routine. I'll email it to you, you upload it into your computer, and then you can stream things in bursts every time your computer is idle, so that things will work. So you make optimum time, optimum efficiency out of the time that you have. Fantastic. That is student collaboration, and otherwise it would have happened in class. Someone said, "Oh, I'll help you."
Yeah. I have also heard that academics in Fiji are only able to download 100 pages a month. So if they want any articles, they can only get 100 pages a month. That's not a copy and view. mean,
Yeah.
it's weeks.
Yeah.
It's, you'd be lucky if it's 100 pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the academics, that's not the students.
Yeah. No, there are real serious issues, and we are in Australia. We're not as spoiled as Sweden, the Netherlands, or South Korea in broadband density coverage, but we are pretty well off compared to other places in the world. I agree.
So it's actually building in the fail states, isn't it? So you've got a system, and then you've got to have.
Yes, you noticed in the screen display of Evelyne's resource, there was a transcript option.
Yeah.
That's government mandatory in Australia.
Yeah.
Actually.
No.
Yeah, that's.
For other people's access.
Well, it just so happens that the issues you talk about can be complementary to the issues that people can't see.
Yeah.
And so we look for that's the principles of universal design, right? So
Yeah.
if you're looking for complementary requirements, what's interesting though is that the transcript is mandatory. We don't do it here unless you upload it to YouTube, where it's automatically done.
Yeah, that's interesting. I initially I was against the transcript idea because transcripts you doesn't have that interactivity component that the videos would have, and I thought you could cheat if you just get the transcript and read through the transcript. You're cheating, but we found out that no one cheats there. So, but that's right. It is a universal access. People with different capacities should be able to access all of these things in different ways. And often just videos don't do this well. So you need to supplement them with readable PDFs so that students actually can read the PDFs.
PDFs there too.
Sometimes, depending how they're formatted. So a scanned PDF is no good, it's just huge.
Now there was something else with a PDF that people couldn't read a PDF.
Well, they can't read a scanned PDF unless they have ISSC. A PDF generated out of Word, PowerPoint can, because the text is separate from the background image.
Yeah, I can't remember, but
so
recently that
in some PDFs are hard to read. If you go to PDF, and maybe we could do that later, there is a function that says read the screen. And if it can't read the screen, if it says there's nothing here to read, then it gives you the option to do OCR, optical character recognition, and it will recognize all the text. But in some PDF forms, text is not recognized. So there are PDF formats that are not readable. But within PDF there's the option to make it readable in different ways. Okay, I was going to go into things that I do. So I told you have an idea, you do a presentation, you record it, and then you upload it. So I know that not everybody is a fan of Vimeo or a fan of YouTube. So Google Hangouts, because Google owns YouTube, they are integrated with each other. But there's a lot of crap on YouTube. So at one point in the past, I realized I don't want to go YouTube. I don't want to associate myself with all that crap. Maybe I need to maybe I need to reconsider that, because again, like Microsoft dominates the world of word processing, maybe Google dominates the world of online videos. My videos are on something called Vimeo. And so this is it, and you could I have different channels and albums for the different things that I do, and if you click on it, it will play. And throughout the policy unit, I use the metaphor of policy development and implementation and analysis as juggling. It is something very complex and messy, but you need to have great discipline to do it well, because otherwise the balls will fall down. The good thing about Vimeo is that you can just download the video. So, you know, in the background you can download it. YouTube doesn't have that functionality. Of course, you can have other software that does it for you. But the thing here is that that you can just do that instantly. You can see your ratings. You can.
What's the difference between these and the Echo 360 we use, the university use?
What is the difference, Lee?
Pretty big difference. I mean, the accessibility of the Echo 360 for a start, we're always having to explain to students the very unintuitive way of accessing the recordings, the way the recordings are produced and automatically produced in a room depending on timetable, which isn't actually conducive to a recording, so you don't have as much control as what Evelyne does when she's producing her own recordings. You're determined by the microphones and everything else that are in the room. I think it's like comparing a rotten egg with apple that's crisp or something like that.
Can you do echo? Can you transfer echo into one of these?
Totally, you download it, but then you're downloading what is essentially a pretty poor production standard, and then upload it.
But you could download it and edit it and add different things in, and redo things.
Yeah, and that's what I do. So you reproduce it, so you can insert higher quality images, or you can delete sound or whatever.
One of the features of YouTube is it has an editor, so you don't need any further software. You can edit the videos in the YouTube channel. I think everything that Evelyne was talking about, that brain, that sparking, we really have to spend a lot of time thinking about all this stuff.
I think that's the bit that's missing. For me, it's missing is having that time to think about it.
Yeah.
And having the time to talk. I mean, I might come up with questions, but then I have to have time to see someone like Lee at the right time when I've got enough space to do it, and I haven't got thousands of other things going on. And that's what's tricky.
Yeah. No, and I think even though I hated Deakin University tremendously with a vengeance, and still they had many leads, and that was fantastic.
Many leads courses for one particular model, which is set in the near future. One thing to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, Vimeo also gives me the opportunity to see how often the videos have been accessed. And how often they were played. So if you have 60 students in a subject, and only 43 have played it, you know that 17 have not. Maybe they have watched the video together. That's possible, which would be good. But
has student ever had a problem accessing the video from your side?
No.
Well, they haven't told you.
Or they haven't told me. But having flipped the classroom when they showed up, I talked to them, and I always assumed that they had watched the video, and we interrogated each other on these things. So there was no blank faces like, "What are you talking about?" Let's keep going here. So I do Vimeo, but YouTube has its own functionality, and it's neatly integrated. So that's pretty
Sorry,
good.
how long normally your recording lasts?
Between 30 and 40 minutes.
So normally, how many weeks in advance before the face-to-face interaction session that the video becomes?
I have tried always to do it at least 2 weeks before. And then when I post the link to the video on LMS or on Wikiversity, I also have to post a PDF of the slides, so that they can read along or scribble on it or whatever.
In that method, you could, the universal design principles apply here is you could provide the audio only, so that if you're in a very poor bandwidth place, slides as video is a very inefficient way of delivering that sort of imagery. 25 frames a second, more or less. Whereas the slides by themselves with the audio is much smaller file size. Then flexibility, you can listen to it on the bus and pick up the slides.
They just try and come up with more formats, really, of the same
That's
material.
right. And that's one of the benefits of Echo 360 is that it automatically generates an audio file of your recording of your result and video. But a lot of the other platforms do as well.
One of the great advances is that in 7 years ago, when I started doing the Healthy Cities unit at Deakin, on the LMS at Deakin, I was forced to upload 5 different versions of the same video. One that would play on Apple devices, and one that would play on Windows devices, and one that could be archived. Whereas now, that is a little bit more seamless, so you don't have to worry about all of those different things, like resolution. And if you produce this, you need to be a little bit tech savvy, that you don't get massive files that you know, in the past it would take me virtually a day to upload a video onto Vimeo, and then for students to download it again, whereas these days that goes a bit quicker.
Yeah. For that subject, how many face-to-face interaction sessions that you did, and how long that section's for?
For the one at La Trobe?
For that subject.
So it was a normal semester, 13-week. All in all, we had 10 sessions, 10 videos, and therefore 10 sessions.
In the evening?
No, on Tuesday afternoons I would have.
So just a short session.
But face to face, I could touch them. So not virtual reality, I could actually touch them. Then there were students who were working or had other commitments, and I would organize the very same session for those students online on Monday evening. So this for me is the real concern about workload. Blended means that you are in class, and of course the technology is there that you can pipe the class into cyberspace and bring students from. But if you've ever been on a teleconference, you know that the other side never really engages as full as they could. So it is better to do the same thing again uniquely for the people that are online. So you're doubling up. I actually, even though my workload was just for one session, I did it twice.
I've been searching for techniques and methods to avoid that very true saying, that doubling up. And part of the thinking, you don't have many ideas or examples to point to in the faculty.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if it's possible that you could do both in the same. So at the moment, you are delivering a presentation that is entirely designed for this setting, and the people online get, as you said, the lesser version. And looking for ideas and examples of how to do that so that both benefit in different ways in the same ways. The only example I've got at the moment talking about is the usual icebreaker where you do a get to know you, do around the table, and somebody's taking the bios to a forum, which is like Moodle. So then you started to complement the asynchronous. If you didn't take the notes to the forum, then it's just a hot air in the room with got to know you better. And it's not doubling up necessarily, you're capturing something that's going on in the room.
Well, I've been trying to deal with this, and it always requires either yourself doing it twice or someone else facilitating online while you are doing, because it's 2 different spaces. And
well, on that, could you comment about what you showed us from Deakin, the highly produced resources, to where you are now in Vimeo, where you're independently producing solo compared to a team who was producing for you or with you?
Well, the team at Deakin really was Flash programmers and professional video recording. Yeah.
But that is very expensive resource.
Yeah. I think I don't really compromise on the substance. I do compromise on the video quality, obviously, because I'm sitting in front of a webcam at home, and you really want to have you should have a sound shell, because the sound quality of my videos isn't tremendous, even though I'm using a very good microphone. So you want to sit in a space that doesn't make echoes. So that's a difference. And of course you could, but will you? And what I am still challenged with is to make videos more interactive. So the Flash programming of the material from Deakin really enabled stop and play, enlarging things popping out at the command of a student, not at my programming, but when they want it. When they want to access the transcript, they don't have to go out of it, go somewhere else, get the transcript from there, which is what I do now. Within the same environment, they can still click on the transcript. And as I said, if I would produce my videos in Flash, that would be allowed. But you can't do, even if I would do it in Flash, I can't put that up on LMS easily myself. You need to have a technician to help you with that.
You mentioned Flash is pretty advanced software.
Well, and that's right. And some people would have told me in the past, but you can do HTML5. Yeah. Well, look, do I have to start learning HTML5? I want to have that user friendliness.
This is juggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, it's because it's like how much effort you've got to put in to produce something that you're going to produce anyway, and then have to still do twice.
Yeah.
Where are the savings for you? And I think there are, but it takes a while to realise them. You can raise the students up a lot.
Yeah.
But you've got that cost.
Yeah.
And then all the other playing things, you want to make it accessible, and look good, but how?
Yeah.
The part two is that in the thinking domain, is that we may be trying to fit a paradigm of education into something that simply doesn't fit. So the music industry, the news media, everything else is challenged by this method of communicating and accessing information. So we're trying to take a 40-minute lecture and make it palatable online versus not necessarily rethinking that paradigm completely. And there are some very good, there's two I would mention, webism as socialism, as feminism, understanding the web as a social movement, webism, and then a very good lecture for 40 minutes called The Anthropological Introduction to YouTube, with these anthropologists in the US trying to analyze and understand that thing, and that would hopefully stimulate ideas for you to teach well in this space.
The challenge I have, another challenge I have with this, is trying to work out how to put my content into a way that's interactive. Because I definitely was taught in the didactic, sit classroom. I'm here and just write it down. And that's, you tend to think that's how you learn, that's how you teach others. One of my things that I've realised just recently is we keep saying, the attention span of students today is so much less than it was. But in a way, we don't really know that. What we know is what our attention span was in our classroom. I'm not aware of the students who were struggling in the classroom that I was in.
Yeah.
I just know what my experience was. I don't know, there may have been students struggling, and there probably were students struggling in that class. I don't know how they were dealt with. Now, as the person at front, responsible for the whole class, I can see the ones that are not struggling and the ones that are struggling. So all of us are coming from an experience where we weren't the ones struggling in the classroom generally. So we don't know what was happening to the others, but now we're aware of it. So I think that's it. And we keep telling ourselves this myth, students are different. I think they're a bit different, but they're not that different.
They are a bit different. And I think as a cohort, they have become more different.
Their expectations are different.
Their expectations.
The biology of their learning process is not different.
Yeah.
But I think their expectations which determine everything.
Yeah, but also we're more aware of teaching. I mean, we're more aware now of how people learn than we were when we were learning. So therefore we're looking for different things and we're conscious of different things.
Yeah.
You could, what we're listening to then, reflecting on the dialogue that was perhaps happening, is you could suggest methods in a group setting like this that forces attention span more. So if you are going to speak or contribute to the forum, you must first paraphrase what was said before you. And then that will force you to concentrate on what that person's saying, because you know you're going to have to summarize what they just said before you reply to your next point. There could be a whole range of rules or some sort of behavioural thing you could put down.
Shall I?
You ask the question.
Yeah.
You mentioned on Monday evening, then you get the online stream to watch what you recorded. Is this an interaction session?
No. I don't get them to watch what I recorded. They do that in their own time. On Monday evening, I use one of those Illuminate Live or WebEx to connect with them, and they connect with each other.
That technology here?
And we discuss.
Yes, Illuminate Live is in Latrobe services for now.
Latrobe has.
Illuminate Live. Yeah.
In fact, they're getting more, the students are getting more.
Yeah, it's Blackboard Collaborate.
Yeah, you just not have access. You just send an email to ICT or to TLT and ask for access to Blackboard Collaborate. It used to be called that.
Yeah.
Mine's saying you can help you with.
Well, the restructure, we have no very little support for that sort of stuff, which then reinforces the argument of independent practice. Clearly, one person associated with at least to teach British videos is not sustainable here, it has been. So maybe concentrating your efforts on developing independent skills so that you aren't dependent on provision of Blackboard and things like that.
Otherwise, it's too stressful of us to back all the time and having to think, oh, well, I'm going to have to plan for this not being available in a period of time. So how do I get confident? What can I actually trust?
Yeah.
Yes. For me, tapping into the concept of workers it gives me a set of principles to operate, but at the moment it's at odds with institutions.
No, I mean, I want to. My next slide actually. So this is the LMS area for my subject for the last semester, and what I wanted is to engage with students. So the videos are online and all. It's all there. If you would go down, there are all these little pop-ups and things. But what I really wanted to be able to do was to share with them things that I see. So you can build in a Twitter feed, and what it does is if you click there, it just goes to my it goes to my Twitter feed, and then what I tell the students is that you can follow me. You don't really need to follow me. You can also search for the hashtag with the subject code, and then find what I tweet about this subject. And of course, it only started this week, so I haven't tweeted anything yet. But you can just go here and.
Did you tweet your lecture, the whole thing?
So what I tweet the URL, the shortened URL of my lecture once it's up. So as soon as it's online, I tweet the URL, and I give it a 140 character or 130 character description.
You could also set the challenge to your students to tweet your lecture. A hashtag, which you see that.
I don't think my students tweet. I asked that they, it was a foreign concept to them, and that to me is unfortunate because I think Twitter's great.
Perhaps with some encouragement that might realise that.
So that's the question. How many students follow me? Because you can see that. Out of the 60 that were enrolled in this subject, less than 10 started to follow me.
So 13% of our population use Twitter. How many are actually actively using it? So nonetheless, ABC and media channels.
It's going to change. It's going to increase quickly, and it's a good idea to be aware of it. Yeah.
Of course, you don't need LMS to access my Twitter feed. You can just directly go. Well, the other thing, because I like anarchy a little bit, that's why I liked Lee's idea about Wikiversity that's accessible to all. But I also have my own website, and so you just post a Twitter feed here, and enable students to go outside of the La Trobe environment to access stuff that I think is worthwhile. And I would encourage it. So at Deakin, this was prohibited. This was bad. You wouldn't do it. Whereas that's the good thing about La Trobe. Anything goes. So build your own website. If you want to have your own website with all your teaching, go.
I think we should have a session on Twitter. So we're allowed to do this, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think you should be cautious of one platform. So there's a phenomenon in Twitter which you definitely understand and look for that phenomenon emerging anyway. But Twitter will pass, and, you know, but the phenomenon of it won't pass.
Yeah. No.
Let's see. One of the great things, I like to play with graphics. So for every subject, I try to make a little logo, and so that students instantly recognize it when they see the logo. So for IPO, this is the thing that I produced. If you are on Twitter, but on virtually every social medium, they like infographics, and this is a bad infographic, I think, about the flipped classroom, because too much. Anyway, their argument in this infographic, and I will be very happy to share the file with you so you can study it in detail. But what they say, and this is how strong is this evidence, they say that by flipping the classroom, making stuff available online, and then using the classroom to engage with students, actually is better for students, makes them learn better, makes them pass more, and makes them appreciate your teaching in better ways. And however you do that, I don't care. I think.
Interesting bit of data on that, fascinating would be, we know that very few of our students do the full reading, so putting your stuff online doesn't necessarily follow that they're doing the reading or comprehending. Yeah. So we might be discovering that content less is the way to teach, is that you don't put things online, you don't give lectures. I'm not saying you should, but you might be indicating that our emphasis on content and delivery is way overweighted, and that we need to invest much more time on what you're saying. The contact connection and dialogue.
Well, that is an interesting point. When I finally found the university that I liked in my younger years, I went to an experimental Dutch university in the south of the country. If anyone has ever been to the Netherlands, you must know the town of Maastricht in the deep south of the country. And they were radical about problem-based learning, and absolutely radical. They had a constitution that said these are the rules for this university, and one of the rules was no tests. Another rule was no lectures. So the entire curriculum was crafted very carefully, but driven by real-life problems, programmed by real-life problems, and small groups of students would look at those real-life problems. The first 6 weeks of every curriculum started with not the substance of that curriculum, but how do you deal with problems? How do you dissect problems? How do you study problems? How are you critical about problems? How are you creative? What are group dynamics? How do you deal with others in the group to make the most of your university time? And only then you would move into this. And there were lectures, but only when the students decided they needed them. So you would have looked at the problem, and you would. I remember when I did this, we discussed something about management, and we had studied it, and we wanted to know what is matrix management. And there was a list of content specialists And of course, this was programmed. This was So you look in the list of content specialists, and lo and behold, there's some guy who knows something about matrix management, and we invited him to come and deliver a lecture. And then it is hugely effective. You know, you don't have a lecture because you have to show up in class and someone is telling you stuff about stuff that you don't want to know anything about. Here, this was bespoke, it was responsive, it was exactly what we needed to hear, and then we could move on. And no tests, well, there were lots of tests. There was every educational attainment scored points. So you would have formative assessments that you scored points on, but not on a scale. So there was a maximum number of points after 4 years, which was 1,200. You could, if you did everything perfectly, you would have 1,200 points. But that didn't matter. Maximum didn't matter. Optimum mattered. And so every 6 weeks, so these were periods of 6 weeks looking at one problem domain, you got the statistics of your performance, of the cohort performance, and of other years' cohort performance. So you knew, I am better than the median, or I'm better than one standard deviation above the median. And our year was exactly as good as last year, or we were a little bit better. So I am actually better than most of my classmates. So you would get those statistics. I mean, this was the early 1980s, so they must have been playing the computers really well. But you got that stuff, and you looked at the distributions, and you would think, doing well, really, really well. And testing was constant. Like in the real world, you know, in the real world, when you're in a job, it's not that at the end of the year, all of a sudden you have a test and someone says, okay, your performance was good. What matters is how you do on a daily basis. And I loved that system. And that is exactly what you just said. Just delivering pre-digested stuff doesn't work.
So some of the feedback we get about inquiry-based learning, which is somewhat an instantiation of problem-based learning, although done very differently here, is that the biggest impact or impediment to that is that we still require 10 or 12, 13-week periods for you to complete. And we know that people learn at different paces, which of course openness would help with that. You don't have to enroll until you're finished.
Yeah.
You can take as long as you don't get your subsidies and all that other complex stuff. But it's remarkable that that was imagined and implemented in the 80s. This was long before the web is common and generating a social idea. But what you described there was how a welcome home thing in people who are motivated around web ideas. Because now we have, when I need that lecture, it's not necessarily so that I have to invite that lecturer because you've just found me a keyword. And I put that into Google and I find the lecture. So the problem now is how do I know this is a good lecture on that concept, which is not. That's not unsolvable. That's quite easy to do. You as the lecturer could organise all the relevant ones before the semester goes in and then just searching that list.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the data is so much richer potentially now than it probably was in the 80s, that we can get quite a rich picture on how the cohort was before, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's another one of the contradictions that we're having at the moment is that, you know, that being told to be flexible, and then, but at the same time having these constraints put on us about how we do things.
Yeah.
You know, I can think of lots of different ways I'd like to use the same time, but construct it differently, but then, you know, you've got to stick to your program.
Although I do wonder if we were to come to understand universal design, apply it in our practice with the intended audience being outside this university. Not because necessarily that's our primary focus, we're still focused on our enrolled students because they're paid, etc. But then there is a way we can teach these people effectively while also starting to reach an audience out there, knowing that these students who enroll will eventually be that audience out there. And then we start to enter into a space we aren't compromising any policies or procedures or anything, and we're on the track towards developing skills and attitudes that might capitalize this.
But one of the ways of knowing that an online lecture is good is peer ratings. You go to you want to book a hotel, and you go to TripAdvisor, and it has the ratings for that hotel. Well, I've been disappointed with that system, because people look for different things in hotels, and so I've been booking fantastic hotels that when I arrived were crap, but they had fantastic rating because they were cheap in an otherwise expensive city. Mm-hmm. So you need to know what you're rating. So if you could have a rating of online content, but there needs to be some kind of, I'm hesitant to say this, but some kind of credentialing system.
But I think one of that things that brings up, and I think it's the same thing about putting stuff before and after the flip, you have to think differently about what you're trying to teach and what it is that what's important for you to rate. Yeah. So once you become, if you just look at a rating and you just accept it, then you become more conscious. No, I'm thinking this particular thing, I'm not that interested in that. So then when you look at the rating, you start to be a bit more discriminating about what they are rating. Yeah. But because one of the things I think that have become aware of, I'm not being a fantastic teacher or anything, but because I'm not, but I know that I have to teach that students often have so much stuff put onto them, and so much content that they can't deal with it, whereas you have to introduce content or concepts at a rate that changes, that has to be slower at the beginning, and then you can speed up. Once they've got the key concepts, then you can teach add a lot more. But if we do it at the same rate, they're lost. Yeah. So the beginning has to be slower, so that you can be sure that they are on the same rate. And that takes, so you don't start with 40-minute lectures, you start with shorter ones. Or at all, but it's almost like little snacks, so that they've got that concept, that you're not going, filling it up 40 minutes with 10 concepts. You've got to think each concept separately. Yeah.
And also, I think we need to, that's why I really appreciate student evaluations of our teaching, but not with response rates of about 30%. Because what I saw yesterday was complete crap. That was nonsense. That was so. My subject, political science, very abstract, very theoretical, even challenging for me. Students said, not so challenging. I thought it was fairly simple. And then when I read in the qualitative feedback, some students said, well, this was by far the most challenging subject I've ever had. So how is that possible in the same cohort, that some students find this really beyond them, but really want to fight for getting it right, whereas others say, didn't do it for me. Well, then you probably didn't read anything, did you? Yeah. So that's the trick, how to get them there to that point. And I think technology is only an aid. We really need to put that brain power into it, and the feedback, good feedback, will make us improve ourselves, but silly feedback doesn't.
Yeah, so the technology is one of the ways. The thinking is actually thinking about how you're going to teach the content and how you're going to use technology to help you do that. Yeah. But it's actually reimagining how you deliver or how you teach it, I think, is really what the challenge is.
Yeah.
And to perhaps qualify that technology is only a tool, or it's not, it's political and it's economical and all of these things. So in our thinking, in our selection of tools, obviously I'm political in all the tools, and reject the Trump tools almost unanimously, but not without some thought behind it. It's just that we don't have an opportunity to really think about the implications of that. How often do we even do this? We have somebody who's ready to be articulate in their methods, You present it to a PDF group, it hardly ever happens.
Well, that's what we need to do, much more.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
So my last slide, because I didn't know how this would pan out, so I thought if we had another hour, can we workshop this? And I thought we should think of the best core subject session that you've ever run, and that made you really happy, thinking, wow, this was cool stuff. And then think about what made it the best. Was it good for you, or was it good for the students, or was it good for the novel ways of looking at things, or what?
And did that show up in the evaluations?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and then consider how all of this technology would enhance it. You know, what would you tweet stuff? Would you Facebook it? Would you WebEx it? You know, would that for you have any added value? And I think that ultimately is the real discussion for people who are not here now, because they may not want to be convinced. They're happy with what they do. They have me turn up next week Monday in a class and lecture for 3 hours to a group of unwilling students. I'm happy to deliver, but I think it's silly.
One of the benefits of the online group that was following the stream is they have to communicate in quantitative ways, in that here's a comment, it happened, there is the intent of the comment. There are a number of comments that were made, but I've already forgotten them.
Yeah.
But there's a request for the Economist article that you cited to go up. I do remember. We need to do something on Twitter. And I suggested we look at anthropological introduction to YouTube and look at web as a social thing. So document those, because if we don't do a workshop immediately after, and we do come to a workshop, at least we're starting with something when our brain was ticking and not thinking about policy or something else. So that's one of the benefits, I think, of the online, is that we potentially have something measurable, data, we can go back to it, press stop and replay and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to suggest is maybe a shared resource about how to access, if someone's already done like an introductory piece, like a little clip on how to use some of the mediums, that we have that as a shared resource. We don't have to keep all the people doing it.
I feel like we do a lot of duplication that we can avoid. Try to work out a way to do that.
Right, and we do a lot of isolated, very good things.
Isolated, yeah.
But then, see, Evelyne, her lectures are now openly accessible on Vimeo. So maybe the behaviour change is all that's needed to address your problem, because all of those how-to guides, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars has already been spent by lecturers producing videos and printouts for students on how to use Illuminate Live and all this stuff. But you've got to know how to find them. Now, we all know how to Google search, but until it's on the internet, we won't hit it. Now, if a Google search, if I put your subject code and then the thing that I'm looking for, then I know that I'm pretty much searching only your subject content. And all I need to do is learn or have the behaviour of putting that into Google search rather than trying to navigate a restricted internet system which may or may not have Google system.
Well, the other thing about that is that I need to know that the software is called Illuminate Live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Well, but what I found is that there are fantastic repositories of help within La Trobe, but virtually impossible to find.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have a search engine. The search engine business was knocked out 20 years ago, 15 years ago, by a company called Google. So, unfortunately, we're attached to that.
But can't we, why can't we in the school or faculty have a resource where someone, like our own thing, where someone's, I've used this, this is a helpful resource, this is where you can find it.
We do.
Do we?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Behavioural changes in the way. So we have a number of, so the university has Yammer, It's
Yeah.
a place where you can.
Owned by Microsoft.
Owned by Microsoft, surveyed by bosses, so you can lose your job again.
Yes, that's right. I am not on Yammer. Anyone who is on Yammer, get off it.
So in the factory, we
I'll get the
started,
data.
in the factory we started 18 months ago to use the Google Plus community. Teachers of health professionals now has 147 members. Target is 200 members. The idea is that if you have a question, you post it to the forum. Great idea.
No one uses the forum.
It's just the same if your students don't use Twitter.
Mm.
There is great value in it, but the challenge is how do we get the behavior change?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, and that's my question with all of this, is, you've got to have the time. You might have the idea, but then you've got to have the time, and you have to get over that hurdle. It's going to take more time to find out about it and get used to using it than doing it the way that you currently do.
Yeah, and it's the case. I mean, Evelyne is obviously proficient with all of this stuff, but isn't using teachers and health professionals not completely understanding that.
I'm a member though, but
That's right. So even though somebody is clearly in the space or in the target group, it's still a challenge. So I don't know. Your question is, it doesn't have that easy answer.
Yeah.
can I, talking about time, I think we have to be more ruthless. One of the things where we all fall down is that we need to respond to whim all the time. There's admin that has to be done, forms that need to be filled out, emails that need to be responded to, we have to show up in class. I am ruthless. I am not doing anything else but this sort of stuff on a Friday. My Fridays are sacred. If people invite me to go somewhere on a Friday, sorry, can't do it. If I'm asked to lecture or attend a meeting on Fridays, can't do it. That is quarantined, because otherwise I won't get it done. And that is a degree of ruthlessness that I think we all should have. It's another way of saying no.
Oh yeah, no, that's a good idea. I mean, I'm only on a 0.6 contract at the moment, so that's.
Yeah.
I can't do everything I've got to do in 0.6.
Yeah.
And I have seen another one where, another idea which is similar, where is you determine how many peer reviews you're going to do in the next 12 months, which makes you more, you're only going to peer review 10 articles in the next 12 months. So it makes you a bit more discriminating about what you're going to, about more willing to say yes and no. Oh, yes or no. So you're only going to do peer review so many grant applications, those sorts of things, which will all be extra things that come out as well.
Yeah.
How many students you're going to look after, that sort of stuff.
I have a colleague at Deakin, a fantastic policy that she started running. She only looks at her email for 1 hour once she comes into the office in the morning, and for 1 hour before she leaves. And the rest of the day, there's a message, an auto response message saying, I am not looking at emails between 10 and 4. Do not expect an instant response. I think that's wonderful. Because that means that you have the bulk of your day to focus on other stuff, and not having the need to instant respond to what may appear emergencies, and most of the time aren't.
For procrastinators like me, that responding to your email feels like at least you've done something, and I've got to own up to that. At least I've done something today.
Yeah.
Seems that perhaps listing off a couple of things, so time management and prioritization of tasks are two things we talked about there. Perhaps if we're going to have another sort of open conference of ideas, we've had 4 so far on different things, but that might be a topic where we share ideas on how we can save time, prioritize tasks.
It's actually allocating time, like time's always, you've only got a certain amount of time, and there's always competing things for it. It's actually making time to think just about this. Yeah. So, and to say that that's a legitimate activity for, same as writing. People always put writing in an article, oh yes, they try and fit it in around other things. And it's
well, one of the things I got with the teachers and health professionals, somebody was active quite a bit of time in the early stages of it and then became non-active. So I asked her, well, what happened? And she said, I felt like this wasn't legitimate use of my time. And it was really unfortunate because we aren't recognising what professional development looks like these days. Paradigm shift hasn't been recognised. We spend all our money on workshops, and we know that 90% of what we learn is word of mouth in the corridors in the staff room and on the social media thing.
So, wrapping up.
Make it so. Make it so. Make it so. Make it so. Make it so.
What will be required for us to make it so?
Make it so. Make it so.
You know Star Trek.
Make it so. Make it so.
This
Make it
is
so. Make it so.
the crew of the Enterprise making it so.
Make it so. Make it so. Make
I,
it
I,
so.
I want to mention that made in China stuff there, WeChat, we are using that to organize interactions between students and also between students and the teachers. The good thing with WeChat is that you can host anything. It can be video, audio, word, and link to other external resources. And because it's made in China, so there's no barrier for Chinese to access to, and you can handle different language context, and it's growing largely. I think it could become a global.
That's a fascinating thing. Take universal design. There is a country, at least one, who has banned largely the use of US instruments in its country. We have Chinese students. Perhaps I should, being an advocate of Google and YouTube, etc., use the universal design principle, say, because of that cohort, won't use US instruments. I'm quite happy for my data to go to Chinese surveillance instead of US surveillance, because the US are a murderous regime, the Chinese so far are not. So I use only systems. So the question is, can an only image reader use Chinese systems?
Yeah, it can, as I say, it can handle multiple languages. So no problem with that.
But I think we all start using Chinese-based platforms.
Yeah, in many cases, my students post their voice language there. They're not bothered to type in anything because typing Chinese characters is much more difficult compared to English letters. So in many cases, they just speak and then send it back.
Yeah, fantastic.
So pragmatically, it solves a problem. Politically, it's exciting.
And we can even trace where the students are when they post their
What's the location?
Yeah, the kilometers.
That is, yeah. That is a Twitter functionality that occasionally I switch off. Because otherwise people just know where I am. And the good thing about online, about social media, is that you can do it from anywhere in the world, and still pretending to be in Australia. So the students don't need to know that I'm in Switzerland or I'm here.
We had a teacher in Canberra who took a long time to come to this sort of method. In the end, she started lecturing from a park bench on her favourite beach in her wetsuit, fresh after a surf, which was completely different image and dynamic to standing suited in front of a lecture. And the 15-minute lectures straight from the park bench, audio wasn't a problem because the expectation of the quality was completely set differently now. It was received favorably.
So, if we want to make it so, and if we're going to have a next meeting like this or online, and have more people who survive in this faculty to attend, what shall we do to make it so? I'm here for another year. Don't know about you, but
We don't know either.
so at least I can plan for another 12 months.
You are here for another year, I'm here for another month. But the work that we've done stays available to everyone. So the invitation to TIP to join their Teachers of Health Professionals, which isn't just lecturer-centric, because that would be a very impoverished way to approach the problem. It's open for access and use beyond that. But the challenge, the behavioural challenge, there's one way to communicate, just put it up there. There's your Vimeo channel and your Twitter channel.
Yep.
Group around that section. Or we can get physical. Stay in the room.
I think what we at least should try to do is to have a session like this every 6 months. And whether we are with La Trobe or not, we could just come here or go online and join. And
I think it has to be more frequently than 6 months because you've got to make it into more of a habit. Rather than 6 months, if you miss it, then you miss it for a whole year. So
yeah, we do open conferences on those themes. We've done methods of assessment before, we've done methods for blended, so-called teaching, etc. 4 of them a year is what our team tries to do. But I agree, it needs to be far more regular than that even.
One of the expectations of the union has been to move to colleges, where those also not do that the centralised resource.
There isn't.
The crowdsource you or?
There isn't. There are professional, very low paid professional staff who simply teach websites. There isn't a role for conceptual development and all of that sort of stuff.
So professional development in relation to teaching methodologies.
There isn't. It would be centrally provided to some degree by a team of 2 or 3, I think.
The whole university.
Yeah. If there's a submission in to challenge that, obviously that's a ridiculous notion. However, the thinking behind it is largely informed by the stuff that I've been saying, is that we shouldn't focus on professional development in the literary setting. We should connect where we have universality outside. We need to get outside. Once we can do that, we don't need people like that. Probably don't need people like you. We don't need lecturers or who knows.
We got that message.
you probably don't need the students.
well, that's the famous empty hospital sketch in Westminster.
Well, apparently not.
This event was almost entirely organised by Evelyne's initiative. So really, the behavioural shift, we need more people like Evelyne who say, I want to do this, put it up.
And there's a gap, between people like Evelyne who are very tech savvy and a lot of the rest of us who are not, and that's a big, it's a fairly big leap, and I think it's good for us to be feeling uncomfortable about that because it makes us aware of how the students feel for a start, and so we have to work out how to do that, how to get past that. And you're right, it has to become more of a priority, but it's a bit hard when you've got all these other things to do as well.
It took me 10 years to get here, and I don't think anyone would expect, well, the university would expect you to get there tomorrow, but in reality, I think it will take and support that isn't there. So
yeah, I mean, having the experience of Deakin where you're sort of forced into, you at least get to learn something, and then you can say, well, I don't like this, I can change it. You get out of it. Those boundaries. It's so loose here. I feel like the looseness is good for people who are tech savvy, but for the people that are not, it's actually very. It makes it hard to get the energy to do anything.
I mean, my frustration is that
have meetings
leadership
yes,
is central. There are
thanks for
leaders
coming.
in our group who have direction,
Yeah.
but we don't follow them because we wait for them to come through in policy.
Thanks, everyone. That was really engaging.
Yeah. Well, I'll happily do it another time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To engage with. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Wrapping up, I'll let Sophie know that we did this and that I'm happy to repeat it on another level or in another location or whatever.
We don't need to. It's recorded now.
Thanks.
I'll just stop the broadcast.